Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Fire Emblem, Crimson Flower in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 16, The Very First Mission. Father, are you positive that this is the case? I'm sure of it. With a stern look resting on his face, Geralt looked intensely towards the direction of his son. Even if I have my gripes about Alois, he is still a knight of Sirios. If he reports to us saying that he's found the bandits on the Red Canyon to be exactly the ones we saw at Remire a month ago, then he's speaking the truth. I see. I understand. After finally picking up the information that was needed, Byleth began to leave the office in which his father worked. Whilst he looked at the direction that his son was walking towards, Geralt went back to his tasks. Not even so much as a thank you, I see. He chuckled. Byleth was still the same, even if he was a teacher. Before he closed the door, Byleth gave a stern glance at his father, and spoke his final words for the meeting. Father, you know how I normally function. Please refrain from your usual jokes. Fine, fine. Geralt continued flipping over his documents for work. Keep the brats in check, though. Emotionless as you may be, their deaths can harm just about anyone psychologically. Remember that. By this point, Byleth had already closed the door to the office. Geralt did not so much as look up to chase after him, as he could already tell that his voice was heard. As strange as an outsider would have found it, the two had their own way of communication, and this was exactly that. After signing over one of his slips of paper, Geralt had already forgotten completely of his small worries. The twins would come back safely, and they would do anything in their power to make sure nobody died. That was a hard fact that he believed in. The day had finally arrived. For the whole month of the harp-string moon, the twins had spent much of their time preparing for this very day. Their first mission was to subdue the bandits which had been found on the Red Canyon. Having done everything they could possibly manage, the twins watched as their students arrived at the front gate towards the final border protecting the village near the academy. As Edelgard walked beside everyone to check their equipment, she took careful care to take into consideration what weapons each student had specialized in. Whilst the twins originally viewed her as one of their students, Edelgard held much more of an important role for the class. As the class representative, she held her honor diligently and carefully. After finally checking Linhardt's bag of vulneries for the mission, she gave a signal towards the twins, to which they responded accordingly. The tension had truly creeped in once the gates to the walls had raised themselves upwards. As they all heard the cranking noises of the metal material grind across the stone door, each person in the group could feel a sense of purpose in their school life. Truly, the moment of watching the gateway to their first mission opening up, was one each student would be remembering most dearly. After it fully raised itself, a loud clang was heard. A shout was given from one of the knights, signaling to Byleth that it was safe to leave. Once this was done, Byleth made a practiced hand sign towards the class, telling them to all walk across with the twins. Finally, they were leaving the monastery. Slowly and slowly, the smooth rocky pavement began turning into that of dirt, until finally, the sights of a forest could be seen. The chirping of the birds, mixed in with the fluorescent blue sky, made the walk feel almost soothing. For now, everyone was enjoying this moment. To them, they had completely forgotten the fact that they were being sent to kill. In this moment, everyone felt human. All right, can Edelgard please come frontwards with me and sister? Byleth turned back, breaking the silence of peace almost immediately. If she has not yet heard this message, then I would like whoever that had heard me to relay this to her. I shall bring no effort in repeating myself. There isn't a need for anyone to signal towards me. Edelgard spoke up after not a moment's notice. As the class dispersed for a moment, this allowed them to make way for their leader to walk up front to the siblings. Whilst Byleth was confused by the whole ordeal that was taking place, her brother ignored her lack of knowledge and continued to his usual plans. Do you understand why I have called you alone to discuss our plans with you? I do, and I must say that I expect no less from you. This caught Byleth by surprise, to which she shot a confused look at both of her comrades. Wait, what gives? Am I really the only one who's confused? I'll try to summarize what I believe that Professor Byleth was implying. With a slight smile, Edelgard spoke about what she had examined of the situation. It does well to discuss your plans for the assignment at an early stage of the mission. My guess is that this way, we have a lower risk of the enemy figuring our plans through spellwork, which should hopefully help in ensuring our safety. You also want me to relay what I discuss with you to the rest of the class, correct? As the princess of the Adrestian Empire, Edelgard had done nothing wrong in disappointing Byleth. So far, she was an exceptional student, and her observations were a testimony to that. After nodding his head in agreement to tell Edelgard that she had guessed correctly, the two of them began to hear a sound of pure amazement from Byleth. Ignoring her enthusiastic responses, Byleth spoke up again. What you have guessed is entirely correct, so let me waste no effort in telling you of our actions. Unfortunately for you, it seems that a break will have a slim chance of appearing in regards to your workload. I expected as much, but I plan on contributing as much as I possibly can to this month's assignment. I look forward to such. Finally, Byleth began to relay the mission. Every 4 hours, we shall take a break around our surroundings to regain our energy. Whilst it may have originally seemed like a mission of killing, it also does us some good for investigation. At our third break, we will be stopping by a camp hosted by the Knights of Sirios. From there, we will be first tasked with investigating our surroundings before our full invasion, and then conducting a suitable plan for the way in which we choose to complete our mission this month. Understood. Edelgard spoke with full authority. Is there anything else worth reporting, Professor? Yes, there is. Me and sister will be splitting everyone into groups of 2 so that they will be with those which they work best with. Whilst you originally would have joined them, there will be an odd number in one of the groups for a reason, and that is in which we need to use you, for bargaining bait. Byleth knew that his words could easily become misinterpreted. As expected, Byleth almost gave a scream of shock from this. In having been given the wrong idea, she pulled onto her brother and gave a stern look. What the hell are you dash? She hails from the Adrestian Empire, and is in fact the sole heir of the country. As she is the princess of their government, we can use her royal connections as a bargaining chip. Whether it is lies, blackmails, or punishments, they are still psychological torture methods that are best suited amongst those the knights have already captured. Brother, that's twisted dash. Byleth was once again cut off. This time, it was not by her brother's arguments containing little emotion, but by the small chuckle of Edelgard from behind them. It was a small sound, but the sole fact in which she was hosting the noise was quick in getting the twins' attention. When they turned back, Edelgard explained herself. I'm sorry, but it's just that normally, everyone would share much the same reaction as Professor Byleth had for your role for me. She composed herself just as quickly as she began her chuckle. I find you most perplexing, Professor. One would assume you had no shame in using an important figure such as me for a nefarious purpose, but I see that stuff such as this does little in phasing you. Cunning as it may be, it is also very much admirable. As his sister could only look in pure shock, Byleth continued as he would have without her interruptions. So I believe you agree to these plans. I was not joking when I said that you would be a valuable asset to the Empire in the future. From the moment we first met, I knew that as a tactician, you were special. With each passing day you prove that even more so. So yes, I agree wholeheartedly to your twisted plan. Good. You save me the trouble of having to interrogate the enemy myself. I am sure using you will yield us all many results. If it will ensure me raising the success of our mission, then I shall do as you order me to. Satisfied from her determination, Byleth raised his hand, dismissing Edelgard. She nodded her head, now returning back to her group. Now, all Byleth had to do was simply wait. As he calmed his eyes to look at the nature surrounding the group, his thoughts shifted to that of the current area they were in. A quick check of their map revealed that they were near their first break point. After checking back at the students, he noticed how each of them still had energy to continue. Surprisingly, they were all conversing with one another. It was difficult to take to heart that each of them were about to be forced to kill, as their innocent smiles did little in wavering. From seeing Edelgard explain everything to them about the plan, their facial expressions had gradually changed. Finally, Byleth understood what his father had told him. Some of these students had never before taken a single life before, and yet they would be told to do so very soon. What the twins were seeing currently, was a stage of early innocence that would soon be lost. It was too late to sympathize, however, as now, there was no going back. Multiple hours had passed. Whilst they had spent a majority of the day walking, the color of the sky changed from blue to a slight tinge of orange by the time they had all finally arrived. Once they all scattered into groups, Billet began to give enthusiastic cheers for the students, in hope that this would motivate them to surpass their fatigue. "I know we're all tired right now. Frankly, I kinda feel my legs aching too, but we still have work to do." Billet began to distribute a range of equipment for each of the students whilst she spoke. "I'm giving permission for everyone to go past the area the knights dared not cross, but no one is to engage in combat. Gather as much of the enemy locations as need be, then report back here. Any information is valuable, so don't feel threatened to come back here if you either gathered nothing today, or found the necessary information early. As long as you're safe, then my brother can help make a plan for tomorrow. Is that understood, people?" "Yes, Professor Billet." The class shouted all at once with optimism. From just her casual and informal speech alone, the students had felt energized enough to continue their mission. As they each scattered about into various areas, Edelgard walked forward and joined the twins. So far, the group were at a point near the canyon. Whilst the grass had completely faded itself, a hard and rocky surface had appeared. Everything about the area they were all in had felt strange, but no one could describe it all properly. Because of this creepy atmosphere, the Red Canyon was surprisingly not a tourist attraction, despite the strange circular dent in the middle of the wasteland, which was exactly where the bandits had hidden themselves. Along with the scorching heat, the orange rocky surface also played a big part in making it an unsettling place. Thankfully, the knights managed to already secure a hostage for interrogations. In meeting up with a lone knight in the area, she approached them with full confidence. She must have been told by Rhea to treat Byleth with the utmost of respect, as she immediately spoke in a tone of duty when meeting him. "Professor, we managed to secure a rogue from getting out to gain reinforcements." Her posture straightened, and she immediately pulled up a map to show the trio. "Our camp is to the east from here. A few of our units are already situated there, but we were far too small to launch a full attack. We were hoping you would leak information from the rogue we captured, as we were told to be dismissed immediately when commanded by you." "Excellent. Lead me towards your camp, and then you may be free to leave." "Understood." Already from being led by him, Edelgard could feel Byleth's superior aura emanate off of him. Whilst she had also seen him from the mock battle, it would seem that Byleth wasted little effort in his communication skills, and only spoke of what was needed. All of the qualities that he portrayed within himself, was exactly what Edelgard aspired to be. Just from observing his behavioral patterns in this past month, Edelgard could see how he showed his leadership skills. Eventually, after around 10 minutes of walking, the group spotted 3 more knights tightly holding onto a seemingly scruffy-looking man. There were no large tents around the area, meaning that the knights were discreet in their espionage. Thankfully, because of this, they had managed to secure someone for Byleth to interrogate. From one look at his torn appearance and static behavior, the trio instantly noticed this was the bandit that was captured. To conceal their identities, the knights had wrapped a fabric around his eyes, blinding him from his surroundings. Once the knights left their post, Byleth shot a glance towards his sister, and pushed his hands forward to give her a signal. Instantly, she responded by jumping over and pushing the rogue criminal to the ground, causing a scream from him. After grabbing his arms to make sure that he would not run away, Billet looked towards her brother, who in turn also did the same for Edelgard. "Where did you originally hail from?" Edelgard asked. "Piss off." Edelgard kept her calm demeanor. The worst thing that could happen was if she let her emotions get the better of her and ruin the investigation. As of right now, she had to give the bandit a feeling of hope. As long as he thought of her as nothing but a female authority, the bandit would not begin revealing much. However, if Edelgard were to build onto this concept, then she could succeed in a new approach for torture. "I will ask again, and I will not hesitate to go on for hours asking the same question. Where did you originally hail from?" The bandit growled in an attempt to show his distaste for her. "I will repeat myself, so I suggest you answer. You know, even if I can't see you, I think you sound like you'd catch a fine price in the market. His first words hosted immediate dark thoughts. A shame that someone like you works against us. I won't tell anything to anyone, so don't even try to do what you want to do to me. You're probably just another pretty face with no spice. At this point, it was time. Before, on their way to the campsite, Edelgard was instructed by Byleth on what to do for a situation of a stalemate in the interrogation. Whilst it was a seemingly unorthodox method, it also served as a good try to leak out information. Regardless of how it would make her look bad, Edelgard began to execute it. You do not seem to recognize my voice fully, so that must mean you're from either the Empire or Alliance. Anyone from the Kingdom of Firgus should at least know of me. She spoke, lying of her heritage. Are you sure you do not want to answer? Last I heard, a chick wasn't in charge of the kingdom. It's true that I am in no position to do just that, but a close relative of the former king could easily take the throne, especially due to the effects of the recent coup that ensued. Her voice in saying this remained stiff as usual, which helped them in their case for convincing the bandit. By using the fact that the bandit was most likely not in touch with recent happenings, this gave them an advantage when lying to him. They had known their trick had worked from the sight of him grating his teeth. Finally, he submitted with a sigh. All right, here's the deal, he spoke. I've got a hefty amount of stories from other countries. Just say the word, and I'll give you some dough on 'em. Surely, you'd like to know their defenses in advance, in case of another invasion. We can trade with dirty intel, but I won't budge on my men. Finally, it was time to use the final moves of the plan. I have no interest in such things. Not even on the Empire's secret black market hidden in Inver, the capital city. At this, Edelgard immediately fell silent in shock. She knew the plan would somehow work, but as of this moment, it was uncovering something that which she had never known of. Why would a royal such as myself want that sort of thing? She boasted, hoping she could gain more information. Because the stuff being sold there is out of this world. The bandit smirked sadistically. They say inside there are stones with the power to turn people like us into monsters. Just swallow a few, and bam, you've got yourself a whole new army. From what we've been told, the Empire's been trying to get rid of them, but we can still track it down. Just plan a royal visit, and then you can buy it from there. Where is it located? Their investigation was almost complete. Go straight ahead from the entrance, past the town center, to the left of the Mittelfrank Opera, and take a left and right, zigzag through the streets 3 times, then open the sewer hatchet near the area filled with the vagabonds and beggars. You've got yourself an abandoned sewer pipeline, brimming with the possibilities of war. After a glance was given to Byleth, it was now apparent that the route was memorized of the illegal market. This new information was such a shock, that Byleth had to quickly signal towards his sister to retighten her grip on the bandit when she loosened it in thought. Edelgard could not believe this either. For years, she had gone through her life, admiring the opera, not knowing that nearby was a criminal haven crawling with the seeds of an early war. In finding pleasure for how this could benefit the Empire, finally, Edelgard spoke once again. Professor Billette, I think it's about time we surprise him. A cocky smile helplessly appeared from her face. Raise the blindfold. She did just that. And all of a sudden, he recognized her white hair, he recognized her red uniform, and he recognized the earring of the Adrestian Empire flag in her ears. A helpless shivering cry erupted from his mouth, and his eyes widened in pure fear. Who he was viewing at this exact moment was not that of the supposed new queen of the Kingdom of Firgus, but the princess of the Adrestian Empire herself, Edelgard. It was at this satisfying moment that Byleth passed on Edelgard's steel axe towards her direction. As she took great pride in receiving her weapon, a grin appeared from Edelgard's face. Finally, it was time to give the threat to the bandit. Here's the deal, I'm sure we both know who I actually am, so I am going to keep this straightforward and simple. Edelgard swung her axe forward, forming a small cut on the bandit, frightening him. You will be arrested by the Adrestian Empire, and you will gain incredible punishment, maybe even leading to death. However, tell us the information you have of your comrades, and I'll simply take you for a lighter sentence for helping us uncover a potential threat in Inver. Does that sound to your liking? Suddenly, he whispered, he cried, he began to display sporadic movement as Billette was struggling in holding him down. As he continued shaking vigorously, Byleth helped his sister hold him onto the ground. Finally, after his entire body was sent just atop the land below his feet, he realized he had been defeated. With a cry for help and a whimper of defeat, he spoke of everything. If Edelgard's identity was revealed early on, they could have easily gotten the information of the bandits any other way, but by his blindness, Edelgard managed to ensure an even greater outcome. Truly, her adoration for Byleth had increased by a large margin, and as their new whimpering leaks came pouring onto their knowledge, the trio had realized they gained victory now. Now all that was left was to wait for the remaining groups to return with the information the bandit had potentially kept hidden from them, and then they would be prepared to attack the very next day. This was it. Their first mission was coming along smoothly. Soon, victory would befall the class, but not in the way they had expected it. Chapter 17, The Red Canyon. They had finally managed to obtain all of the useful information that was possible for them. Before long, the entire class saw themselves within the large indent of the canyon. This was one that had an unusual structural appearance, however down below, it stayed true to what the normal level of the ground would have looked like. Around the main ground, lay broken structures of what seemed to be old gardens, temples, and even possible houses. They were few and far between, but one could only wonder as to what purpose these buildings used to have. From where the students had managed to climb down towards, was a man-made bridge leading to the main area. Further from there, were two more bridges going to the north and east of the area respectively, however, they all led to the same location, which was directly where Costas was meant to be waiting. As they looked amongst themselves, Byleth was the first of the group to speak. From here on out, I want everyone to stay in a large group, up until I say otherwise. He issued hand signals, which the class followed immediately. Bandits normally have far too much pride to loan out information easily. Do not be fooled by trusting the information we were given immediately. Everyone nodded their heads towards him. At this point, Byleth was far more of an experienced tactician to allow for failure, and his words spoke more truth to them than they would otherwise have thought of. Their group arrangement was simple, but thought out. Byleth and Edelgard stood up front, whilst Billette had protected the rear end of the line when crossing the bridge. In the middle of the line was Petra, Dorothea, Bernadetta, Linhard, Casper, and Hubert tucked across them. Not much had happened whilst crossing the bridge. They were spotted by two immediate bandits, to which Byleth responded with a quick command. Bernadetta, draw an arrow. In mere seconds, a bow had been fired across the horizon of the huddle of students, ending off with a skillful shot towards the bandit's stomach. Good. At least now I can ascertain your abilities in this way. Is there anything worthy of note that you would like to tell me? As Edelgard skillfully took out the second bandit across the bridge, Bernadetta stammered for a response. Well, I think that's about it. I can't exactly counter from a close range, not that I'd need to. Bernadetta looked over at the lone arrow pierced through the bandit. Her breath escaped her for a moment. I really don't think I gave him much of a chance. Rather than taking time to assure her, Byleth simply noted this piece of knowledge and ordered the class to move on. Everything was fine, up until Billette was forced to stop following after the class. From behind her, Bernadetta was left, picking up the arrow that had originally been fired. Almost in a trance, she stared at the blood encircling it, with fearful eyes. You okay? A pat was given on her shoulder. Come on, Bernadetta. Let's carry forward. I'll treat you guys after this. Rather than answering in a nervous state as she usually would, Bernadetta moved along in pure silence. Billette could see her head facing down at the arrow in her hands as she passed by, very much refusing to put it into the confines of her quiver. Doesn't matter what I'm offered to be doing this, I still want to go home. Only those words being uttered, was enough to shake Billette. At this point, Billette was the one to stop moving along with the group. As she watched Bernadetta reluctantly catch up, her hands clenched one another in annoyance. With a final look at the corpse of the bandit, she whispered so nobody could possibly hear her. Stupid brother. Do it on me, but leave the children out of your idiocy for once. She knew Byleth could not hear her, but her heart still ached to talk. At least have some idea of what we're going through. As she finally caught up, Billet could see the group was finally returning back towards its basic formation. Whilst Byleth had never admitted this fully yet, Billet herself knew she was chosen at the rear of the group to monitor the students and make sure they did not fall behind. The group did an easy job walking through the small open landscape of the grounds below them. The only thing out of note for this journey was the fact that not any more bandits were appearing. Rather than worrying as one would, Byleth took the logical step, and assumed that most of them were lying in wait across the main camp. Suddenly, Petra had stopped walking. "I am wanting all of us to stop now," she almost shouted, but tried her best to remain calm. "Movement is being made across the far end. This is not wise to continue." She moved her finger slightly towards the east of the group. Over in that direction. The group could hear it now. For the first time, the entire class had finally noticed something astounding that was lurking beneath the canyon, which were shattered ruins. It was likely that they were hiding within the confines of them, hoping for a cheap opportunity for an attack. However, something began to irk Byleth. The rustling, the bumping of the walls within, and the general grunts of movement coming from the ruins, were far too loud to be thought of as an ambush. Either the bandit was far too inexperienced to properly execute his plans, or maybe Dorothea used Thoron at the back end of the group. Suddenly, the class wanted to panic with all of their urges. From behind them, a bandit was making his mad dash towards Petra, hoping to take care of the weaker ranks before moving on to Edelgard and the twins. Petra was among the fastest of her class, so as she turned around from the ruins at lightning speed, it had all made sense. Rather than answering her thoughts fully, she quickly stepped back, whilst a large beam of blue had been fired from the hands of Dorothea. If in mere seconds Petra had not stepped back sooner, or if Dorothea had not reacted with her Thoron spell, then one of the class' outstanding pupils would be no more. They had no time to think after this kill, as suddenly another bandit had emerged. This was one from the ruins they had spotted earlier. Thankfully, without Byleth issuing his commands, Casper's battle cries were the first to alert Hubert and Ferdinand. In a mere instant, they took out the bandit which had jumped up from his ruins. "PFT, and I thought your screaming had no purpose being here," Hubert retorted towards Casper in the aftermath. "I won't continue going for the kill later, but do be sure to find a balance in all of this, Casper." Finally, the group was safe once again. This ambush was clever, and even Byleth was sure to admit that. The only fatal flaw about it was that it told him far too much about the bandit's situation. Realizing that he was close to fulfilling this month's quota, he began to issue yet another command. "All right, let us move on." "Brother!" A shout came from his sister. Whilst normally she would try her hardest to refrain from emotional responses within battle, she had to do it just this once. "Stop being an idiot and come over here a sec." Byleth was confused initially. Finally, he had reluctantly turned his head. Amongst the three lying, bloodied corpses of bandits, was Linhard, crouched down, not wanting contact with anyone else. What could have upset him so easily? As Byleth looked around, he noticed the entire class had come forward towards him out of consideration. "This is all making me sick." He spoke slowly, gulping at the final word. "Why exactly does killing have to be such a disgusting sport?" Edelgard crouched down now, wanting to calm her peer. "Linhard, it's not a sport dash. It is to them, though." His voice had heightened slightly with fear. "They all see and do it for fun. It's why people like them exist, because they expect to get something good out of it. Why won't they take an interest in something more reasonable and tame?" Almost everyone had not known what to do in this situation. Byleth did as he usually would have done, and started looking around to assess his surroundings for clues. This was stopped immediately however, as the first thing he saw was the mix of a disappointed and angry face from his sister. "You're an idiot," she spoke at a low level, so only both of them could hear her. "Why are you implying that?" Billet had never been angry towards her brother in a long time. Looking towards his unknowing face, however, brought her great discomfort. "I'm going to check on them as well, but just so you know, this is exactly like when we were kids. They should be used to all of this by now, as well." He spoke, whilst his sister still had her back turned. "We are of similar ages." Why should one of them be more transparent than the next? He was ignored in the end. As Billette ran over to see her student in a mass state of panic, she was very much tempted to move forward to calm him down. Knowing how battles could affect the mind at first, she was sure that offering Linhard guidance would lighten his mood, even if it was a little. As she walked forward, Casper had run across instead. "Linhard, stay with us at least." He skidded downwards and grabbed his friend's shoulders. "Do it slowly at least. Try, at least try, to look up. You have it all over your face. Then get used to looking at it." His shouting came out of consideration, and everyone did not need to know they had been childhood friends to see that. "If you can see it on my face, then you can see it everywhere on the ground too. It doesn't work like that, Dash. I know it doesn't. But you should just calm down. I know you like looking at things from a logical standpoint, so listen to me just this once. What happens when you do this? Won't they just call more reinforcements or something? I think that the quicker we get this done, the quicker you'll have to see less blood." Now it all made sense. As they each looked upon Linhard, the class suddenly realized how he had been harnessing a staggering phobia for blood. In all of this time, Linhard had never made an effort to tell anyone of this issue, despite having been in the school for a month now. As Billette looked over in guilt at Linhard's suffering, Petra was the third and final one to attempt to ease Linhard. "Calm your heart. You have nothing to fear." Petra spoke softly. "I have done a lot of hunting back in Brigid, so I know that humans and beasts are one. Once one is killed, they stop moving completely. Please do not worry now, as you are having the safety when around me and everyone else." Petra lightly smiled, making a minimal humming sound whilst doing so. As Linhard looked at her, his shaking slowly began to lessen. It was still there, but not so much anymore. After being reassured, Linhard made it his duty to stand up once again. He was still shaking, however his resolve cut through his fear, and slowly, he was returning to his previous state. "My apologies. I just needed some time to think logically. Please, don't feel burdened by what you just saw. It's always been like this for me, unfortunately." Finally, the class regained their enthusiasm. Now they could move on and look at the bright side of the darkest corner. They all felt unstoppable, because for once in their time in the academy, they had done something without the help of their instructors. As they huddled around Linhard and moved away the corpses to lessen his burden, they all subconsciously began to grow themselves. Little by little, each of them grew their authority by not having to be asked to do these small things. For the first time, they were all growing independently. Once they had adjusted their mood, Byleth quickly gathered the students up once more. "From here on out, the battle will unfold into a much more complicated mess. It has been clear to me that they wish to dispose of us quickly and efficiently. By having themselves wait in hiding to ambush us, it is easy to assume they have meager numbers. Do not be encouraged to move on just yet. I believe with this disadvantage on their side, they shall begin to use more foul tactics." Edelgard was among the first to speak. "Professor Byleth, have you accounted for the split paths that we could potentially be taking? I think it will be best if we all split up into two groups." "A fair idea. Does anybody have any objections?" From this question, no one raised their voice to speak otherwise. Once it was clear that they were to follow their leader once again, Byleth looked over to his sister. It was clear Billette was still in a foul mood, and even if he would have wanted to cheer her up, he could not understand why she was this way. Ignoring Billette's discomfort with the current situation, Byleth trudged forward with his plans. "Edelgard, Dorothea, Linhard, and Bernadetta." Byleth pointed towards his sister, catching her by surprise entirely. "Please can you group up with sister? Meanwhile, I want the rest to follow after me. Whilst I shall go towards the east, sister will take you to the north for a frontal assault." By this point, Billette's mood had entirely disappeared. She began to exhibit a mixed range of thoughts going through her mind, and all at once, her tension suddenly increased. The students that were joining after her group were not just normal ones, but the people whom she had spent time holding attachments with. "Brother, I'm not exactly sure that this is a good plan. Do not worry. We will meet across the other side and battle their leader. Just remember your combat skills, and think as I would. Billette had wanted to speak more, but in seeing how unfitting a time this was, she refrained from it. Once she had brought her mind to finally calm itself to a level that it could still manage to carry on with the battle, she looked across at the group which she would be working with. "I suppose it's time to go. Are you all ready?" "Yeah." The elected classmates all waved in different demeanors. "Right. I guess we should do this." As the group said their farewells, they all began to leave. Unfortunately for Billette, she was to encounter a large issue in this journey. As the pack of students followed after her with trust, only one of them had not fully subdued their worries. For the most part, the walk was silent. The events which had transpired beforehand were far too severe for anyone to strike a conversation upon, and with only a month spent in class, not everyone had fully grasped how to fully converse with each other. The only relationships built so far were of Edelgard and Linhard, along with Dorothea and Bernadetta. Linhard simply walked along the back of the group, observing the area to see if any enemies were nearby. The only links which the students had besides those, were of that with Billette. Curiously, Dorothea had taken a glance towards her mentor. Billette was far too busy looking below her, almost in a state of panic. Occasionally in the walk, Billette would look back and check to see if anyone was in distress. They would give a smile back, but in reality everyone had known this was an awkward situation. "Professor," Dorothea was the first to ask her lingering question. For far too long, she had wanted to speak, so now was the time to do so. "Is killing people one of the church's teachings?" Finally out of her daze, the group looked back. The walking had stopped, and everyone's gazes were on Dorothea. Her question was earnest, but the reality of her tone set it all in motion. Before, the group was ready to wield their weapons, but now some of their motivations had been completely thrown off. Now, their teacher's reluctance to communicate with them had brought their discussions to a standstill. As Billette finally stopped her worrying, she slowly tried her hardest to figure out a suitable response. "I'm not exactly sure myself, actually," Bernadetta mumbled. Despite the breaking of focus on Dorothea being brought to her, she still made an effort to mumble her query. "I came here, because of my circumstances. All we do here, when I speak realistically, is train to kill people. It's not something I dash. That's pure nonsense." A voice broke out. Among the group, Edelgard stepped forward, almost in annoyance. "We're here for the benefit of our country. We do things here for the future dash." "It's what you do, Edelgard." Dorothea's snappy remark managed to save her friend, but only brought the mood down further. In truth, not all of us like the idea of killing people. It helps us, but is it such a good thing to do for our conscience? Everyone had their own motivations. This was the lesson that Billette was taught at this moment. As she looked upon the group, suddenly she remembered her own. She had to press forward, or else she would be dragging the students down with her. She had to save them, because as long as she could bring them higher than her, Billette would be happy. What matters is that we all came here for our own reasons. I came here by accident, but I love teaching you all. I'm sure Edelgard came here to benefit the Empire, and I think you came here to prove a point." She addressed Dorothea with the question, but did not wait a moment for an answer. "The people we fight aren't in the right. As long as you remember that, we can succeed. I think that's how it goes anyway. It's how I've coped with everything so far, anyway." She shot a hesitant smile towards Dorothea and Bernadetta. Finally, the mood had shifted once again. Billette did not want to again be the reason for the downfall in their moods, so this time she had personally made sure to give a childish pat on their heads. "Thanks, Professor. I think, maybe, I can continue. I guess if that's how it works, I'll do it because you're doing it, Dorothea." Bernadetta too had gained confidence with her friend. The group once again decided to march forward. The only voices that could be heard was of Linhard's snide remark. "Good grief. Think of all the progress we would have made if we didn't go through all of this drama." He smiled slightly. An arrow landed beside her. Within a quick instant, Bernadetta had stumbled backwards with a fall. When the thud made a loud boom, suddenly the group became alert, as finally an enemy was beginning to approach. This time, the group was ready. All of this time, the imminent fear had been settling in and fading out along with their emotions, but in this moment they realized they needed to adapt. They had to change, they had to be more aware, they had to see what was in front of them. When including this group, Billette was the one among them who had to change the most. Suddenly, she began to quickly make way for the endangered Bernadetta. All of the time that had passed would be for naught if she did not make it. Whilst her brother would allow the students to fight their own battles, Billette wanted the exact opposite. She wanted to protect them, cherish them, and nurture them in a peaceful manner. She kept running, whilst her legs kept speeding up. As she got closer, her vision only made the length seem more far away. Finally, it was obvious that the class formation was ruined. As a forceful push was given, all Billette could see was the sight of the ground as her body hurled away from her goal. Finally getting up, she realized the previously thrown axe that would have plunged into her if she kept running. As her head tilted for a better view, the voices kept ringing through her head. Immediately, she saw blood in the direction of her goal. She screamed, shouting for why nobody was near her. In a daze, she kept blinking her eyes. As her vision settled and her ears cleared their muffles, Billette was the first to realize that she was being protected. With much skill, Edelgard had already dealt with the pack of approaching bandits with her axe, whilst Linhard shouted words of healing for her. It was no longer Billette giving the commands, as her capable student took her role from her. Up front, a scream was heard, as well as a plea for help. Just a scratch dash, as a cough was given straight after, Billette's eyes widened at the sight in front of her. Defending both friend and instructor alike. If I can't do that whilst staying alive, it wouldn't look good on me, would it? On Dorothea's stomach, was a large mark of red, but a smile of sincerity. It became clear that one of her students had fallen, and it was up to Billette to atone for her mistake. Before she could stand, an arrow shot past Billette, tearing a strand of her hair. A scream was heard from the back of her, whilst all Billette could see was the sight of an angry Bernadetta as she looked back to see who shot the arrow. Don't take her from me dash, a sob was given, but she still continued restocking her bow with the arrows in her quiver. I'll kill you. As Billette turned around, she saw the dead bandit which had been previously shot. Finally standing up, her sword was taken out. Everyone, Billette's face closed itself, almost as an attempt to escape this grim reality. Our mission has changed for the time being, protect Dorothea, we won't let her die. Chapter 18, The Tides of Battle. Our mission has changed for the time being, protect Dorothea, we won't let her die. She screamed this with as much passion as her lungs could muster. Billette could feel herself tear up, but she knew that it was time to level up in resolve. She gritted her teeth, and stiffened her grip on the sword from her hand. As she got up, a new mental fortitude had appeared within her. She was to live onward from this battle, and make sure everyone else did as well. My teacher, what are our orders? It was clear that in being overwhelmed with taking charge, Edelgard started struggling in battle. We don't have the luxury of time unfortunately, so please hurry. She had to think of something. As of right now, a small horde of bandits were making their way towards the group. All they had for protection was that of the barrage of desperate arrows being shot by Bernadetta, whilst a green growing symbol showing her crest was in front of her. By doing this, the bandits were backing up occasionally, and could not manage to make a quick strike on the group. Billette could see this all happening, and she had an idea. It was a risky one, and was far from the foolproof plans that her brother would usually concoct, but it was the only one she could think of. As Billette wiped away any forming tears from her eyes, she swung her sword forward in pure determination. Even if it might become a brief feeling of dark thrill, she knew that this was an opportunity which had to be taken by any means. Edelgard, you and I are our only frontal fighters in the group. I need you to charge in with absolutely no fear for damage. Just whittle away their numbers, and I think as long as you stay a decent range from us, we can slowly close in on you and have Linhard heal your minor damages as you fight. I'll back you up once I tell Linhard my idea. Reckless, it was an amazingly reckless way to change the tides of battle. Edelgard heard this, but did little in questioning it openly. For now, she knew that any doubts in this situation would lead to downfall, so it was imperative that Edelgard could trust her teacher, leader, and tactician. To her, it was a hurdle she had to pass in order to make her way to a better future. All right, I shall trust in you. Thank you. She meant this, as Ballet had felt worried of having her plan being rejected. As the two of them turned back to the fight, they began noticing that the flurry of arrows were lessening from Bernadetta. She was both running out of arrows, and avoiding another batch of them from the other side of the battle. The enemy had gotten drift of why they could not proceed, and this was why their defense began to increase. It's now or never, Professor. I will rush in now, so let's hope Linhard does his part. Her enthusiasm was little in this scenario. Whilst determination could be spotted, it was because it was necessary for a victory. Slowly, Edelgard gave a breath of reluctance, closed her eyes, and then charged in with a scream of anger from Dorothea's injury. Ballet watched her as she continued fighting. Soon enough, she would be joining, but before that, she had to quickly inform Linhard of the plan. As she looked back at Bernadetta, it was apparent that he was nowhere to be spotted. This confused Ballet, but she kept looking. Her head moved, until finally he saw Linhard near the injured Dorothea. Except, he did not seem normal. As Ballet noticed his shaking, she instantly realized exactly what was going on. She quickly ran in panic, and in need to calm him down. When she finally made it, she could see Dorothea was already trying to calm her classmate down from the blood dripping from her stomach, but her coughs and wheezes were not helping the situation. Dorothea was already healed enough, but she needed to not be speaking in order to get rest. Unfortunately, Linhard was in a trance of fear. His hands shook, whilst his eyes kept closing in and out. Linhard, Dorothea's okay. You can relax now. She crouched down and tried to put on the most consoling voice that could help her student. Please, let's go help Edelgard with the battle. I'm sorry for all of this, and I'll take full responsibility when we head back, but right now, our friend needs our help. His shaking was lessening, but not quickly enough. Ballet realized that she did not have the sufficient time to wait for him to calm down, and as much as she had always hated how her brother always looked at situations analytically, she too was beginning to do the same in this dire moment. She had to continue however, and so Ballet rubbed the back of Linhard in hope of calming him. Finally, his shaking was at a level where he could focus. It had not dissipated completely, but for now this was a good level. I apologize, Linhard whispered, slowly bringing himself to face Ballet. I'm not exactly dash. Facing his teacher was the most fatal flaw in this battle, because what he saw in front of him, and behind Ballet, was the scream of Bernadetta. It was loud, and from what could be heard, it was the sound of someone who had never wanted this fate to begin with. As Ballet turned around, her eyes widened. An arrow was beside Bernadetta. It was one that had pierced through her arm, and fully managed to stay stuck between her joints. As the continued screaming echoed through the area, Ballet tried to rush over to her student. Bernadetta was safe for now. She was shot at, meaning that the main reinforcements still had to make their way to kill her fully. This injury however, was one which had made her tears fall down faster than before. Bernadetta, it's okay. Please, calm down. I didn't want to come here, Professor, she whimpered, still sobbing loudly. I made such an amazing friend and we're both going to feel this unbearable pain. It's not how I wanted all of this to go. Ballet wanted to help with all her might, but on seeing the blood escaping Bernadetta's arm, she was suddenly thrust into the middle of the battle. Linhard, having seen her injury, was starting to turn back towards his state of fear. Suddenly it was clear in the group that there was no healer to support Edelgard in her reckless frontal assault. Ballet turned back, and saw Edelgard desperately fighting back the horde of bandits against her. She was incredibly skilled, and had made large amounts of minimal scars across her body. By normal standards, Edelgard would not have survived this fight if she compared to that of the rest of the class. As of this moment, Linhard could not be depended on, and the plan was beginning to fall apart. Edelgard was making a quick retreat in realizing that Linhard was not cooperating, which had only made Ballet feel much more worse in this situation. Professor, we can quickly fight them off here. Apologies for doing so, but I ran back in hope that both of us could fend them off for the group. Edelgard's voice could not be heard. Ballet finally stopped holding back the tears which she had been trying to keep hidden away for so long. She was finally in a trance, leaving only her most capable student to take care of the rest of the situation. I'm sorry. Billet whispered with little emotion in her voice. The remaining presence of hope left in her was finally all drained. Edelgard ignored this. In her eyes, she realized that nobody was always perfect. Maybe Billet had seemed that way because she was always in the vicinity of her brother? Or maybe it was because Billet only followed the orders of her brother. Either way, Edelgard had sadly lost a little respect for her teacher. She was not the iron fighter she had made her out to be, but now an empty husk of her previous emotions. That was how Edelgard had seen her in this moment. That did not mean that Billet did not deserve protection. In reality, she needed it the most. In swinging her axe one more, Edelgard said her final words to Billet before beginning to charge onto the battle once more. I'm going to make sure that I become the Adrestian Empire's emperor, because I don't want people like you to be forced into these situations. Those were her final words before rushing back in towards the heat of the fight. Billet slowly reached her hands to the fleeting figure in front of her, but realized it was too late. Had Edelgard figured everything about her? She realized at this moment that she failed as a teacher. Not only were most of her students severely injured, but one of them was also the sole reason she was even alive to begin with. Edelgard began mashing away at the thieves one by one. As she had skillfully made various dodges, one of the bandits had grabbed her flowing hair in an attempt to pull her in, but she used this to her advantage and shoved the wooden hinge of her axe on the bandit's stomach. After stunning them, clean cuts were made to the enemies around her. There was still more, and it was clear that all of their main firepower was being focused on solely killing Edelgard. It was almost as if they had a personal vendetta against her, but it could not be the case. She continued fighting the horde off, ignoring the stinging feeling from the movement of her cuts. It hurt to the utmost bitter levels, but Edelgard had to endure it. The casualties she would face otherwise would be most horrible if she did not even have the strength to carry on with these scars, so Edelgard continued to fight onwards. Multiple screams were given by each bandit, until they had all been emptied out. Finally, they had been taken out. Her heavy, tired, and desperate gasps for air grew more. As Edelgard slumped her legs in fatigue, she looked towards the damaged group which she had managed to save near the end of their potential deaths. Dorothea was resting with the worst scar of the group, Bernadetta was crying from the heavy wound made on her arm, Linhard was still shaking from the sight of blood, and Billet was still in a trance from the realization of her failure. From an analytical view, it was not the worst ending for this fight, but the heavy losses from such a battle were far too severe. Just a few more. After I rest, then I'll get rid of the rest, and we can all go back to lessons in the monastery. She tried to reassure the group, but her drained strength had caused her voice to go far too silent to be heard. She shut her eyes in rest. For now, nothing bad would come out of this battle. As long as she could make a quick recovery, then this mission would be over. Once they fixed their mistakes in the month ahead, then there would no longer be a worse outcome than this first mission. These thoughts were the only thing keeping Edelgard sane, up until heavy and slow footsteps could be heard from afar. Her eyes went from being shut to a state of massive widening, and she looked over, noticing that it was time to fight once more. Except, the bandit that came forward was not that of a group, but a singular foe, the very one that they had battled before, and one that had come for revenge, Costas. You stupid rich kids actually thought you'd be able to defeat us? We have experience, so how exactly is it a good idea for the church to send a small batch of bumpkins to send us off? I'll bet this is a joke. He faced his axe towards the still crouched Edelgard. Spoiled little noble. Just die. You're wrong. Edelgard ignored the height difference between them and got up in confidence. Being of noble status has nothing to do with our roles and competence in life. I pity you for thinking of such things, but I won't be for long once you're settled onto the ground. Costas' face instantly began twitching in anger. He had wanted to dispose of Edelgard immediately, but something had caught his attention. When he saw her, a glint appeared onto his eyes. I remember last month very clearly, he began narrating, whilst slowly walking up to Billet. I was on the verge of killing the stupid brat. We were seriously about to hold them and her noble friends ransom, up until you and the male you came up, tearing through my most trusted of men. Costas crouched down, showing no remorse for the crying face of Billet in front of him. You sicken me right now. You're telling me that the very one who stopped me from disposing of those brats, is actually this whimpering mug in front of me right now? Pathetic. He stood back up to avoid seeing Billet. Finally, he walked away from the failed professor. Whilst he intended nothing against her for now, the sobs coming from Billet had begun to slowly anger him. He stopped walking, and turned back to her. I'm sorry, she spoke in broken wording. Don't kill them. I'm sorry too, sorry that I don't take orders from you. Costas took forth his axe and swung it with all his might towards the sobbing victim. As it hurtled towards its target, a large clang was heard across the rocky battlefield. Costas looked over, and noticed Billet had managed to still continue crying, but also get out her sword just in time to defend herself. I'm sorry. Please don't kill them, she repeated once more. By now, it was clear that Billet was far too deep into her trance to gain a full grasp of reality. As Costas realized this, he tugged her hair slightly, only to stop in the realization that someone was still watching. You sicken me. Edelgard had been spectating the whole ordeal with anger. What's wrong with you? I can't allow you to make a mockery of Professor Billet, even if she is morally weak. So she became a professor, then. Interesting, but it's just hilarious that her student is the one defending her. I can question her about whether this is the perfect role for her at a later date. As of now, you're the only obstacle in my way. Same to you. It's time I get you out of my way then, too. Finally realizing that this was the time for the final fight of this long battle, Edelgard readied herself. Whilst her axe was typically heavy, she had been spending the past month trying to grasp her speed when holding her axe. Now, it was time to truly put it to the test. She dashed towards her enemy with all of her might. The previous fatigue she felt had been banished from her mind via her emotions, and now it was finally time to put her newfound strength to work. However, Costas was the first to swing. As Edelgard thought she was closing in, she had to quickly drop herself, making her accidentally slide beneath Costas. She quickly used this to her advantage and got up, making sure to jump up and slash away at Costas from his back. He countered with pure instinct, and from there, the two had begun inflicting a series of swings towards one another. None of them were hitting their target. Whenever one of them swung with the front of their axes, the other almost always used their legs to quickly jump away from the sides. Even as Edelgard kept trying to outmatch Costas, his speed and power were far too great. All of his hits were pushing Edelgard back, and as she felt each thud, her strength was waning. Realizing that her axe could not carry her further, Edelgard had a quick idea. She threw her axe onto the air in the highest trajectory she could have possibly pulled off. Costas saw her unarmed, and instantly took this opportunity to fling himself towards her. Edelgard had now set her plan in motion, and in a skillful movement, she sidestepped away, letting Costas completely run away from her. When the axe finally made a thud on the ground, she ignored the impact it made and grappled it with all her might. It was a heavy weapon, but she had to pick it up. Finally, she threw the axe with all her might, towards Costas' unshielded back. It did not work. Costas just managed to turn around at that moment. He stepped away, making the axe crash towards the ground. Big mistake. He growled, almost in a deep joy. As Costas picked up the weapon, he glanced at Edelgard with a smile. It was the most sickening smile anyone could have ever made. His eyes widened, his leftover teeth showed itself, his tongue stuck out, and his hair drifted with the cold weather of the wind. Using his arms, he quickened his pace massively. Edelgard watched as suddenly the stone axe she had been using was thrust onto the rocky ground below. She shouted for her axe, but it was too late. The axe was shattered immediately, leaving her with nothing to defend herself with. I can't lose just yet. The hope in her voice did not fly away just yet. Even if it is a stick I am given to fight you, I will see to it with my life that my goal is accomplished. The dagger she had since childhood was pulled out. It was the very one she accidentally cheated with in the mock battle, but thankfully Dmitri had pardoned her that day. As she withdrew the dagger from the small sheath on her waist, she faced Costas with it facing towards him. You royalties think life always works for you, huh? He asked, sounding genuinely curious. Time to teach you a lesson that pathetic sob state never ever could. Since you pulled out that dagger so willingly, I'll call it, raising your hand, then. He grinned at Edelgard. He ran towards Edelgard. He sliced his axe towards Edelgard, making a clean cut. Blood came out, as well as a scream, and soon an arm which had previously carried a dagger had fallen to the ground. As she continued screaming, Costas began to find the most sickening hilarity from this situation. The House representative kept screaming, whilst the future emperor cried in pain, ending it with the Adrestian princess falling to the ground with a loss of energy from her lost blood. The only one who was still sane enough to be watching this battle was Billet. "You're not really seeing to it with your life, are you?" He continued grinning uncontrollably. "Finally, I can be rid of idiots like you." Realizing that he could no longer be made a fool by Edelgard and Billet, he began to chatter uncontrollably. "That stupid Flame Emperor was wrong. I knew it. I knew that I could get out of this alive. You know what? I did. After all of this is over, I'll happily go towards that stupid masked freak and tell him to stick to his business elsewhere." Edelgard was far too busy wincing in pain to hear Costas' words. He laughed, whilst Edelgard continued screaming, and Billet kept looking in tears. All of this was because Billet had not shown good resolve at the start of the battle. In her eyes, Billet was the downfall of the group. She finally stopped whimpering, but the tears continued streaming down her face. "I'm sorry." She spoke regrettably, but still wanted to grow her voice louder. "I'm sorry." Now, she wanted to shout at the top of her lungs. "I'm so sorry for getting all of you killed." Colors appeared everywhere. Edelgard stopped screaming, Costas stopped laughing, Bernadetta stopped crying, Linhard stopped shaking, and Dorothea stopped coughing in pain. In an instant, everything began moving again. Billet was not aware of this yet, but in this very moment, her life began to fix itself to give her a better chance. The hands of time were turning back to a better future. Chapter 19, Divine Pulse. It was another enemy taken down. As Petra had saved Caspar from sustaining a minor injury, she smiled at him earnestly. A thanks was made, but nothing more. "We are all making excellent progress." Their teacher spoke from behind the group. "Let us move on." From hearing this, Ferdinand, Hubert, Caspar, and Petra nodded to their orders and walked ahead with various degrees of obedience. As they continued, Byleth was taking a considerable amount of time thinking to himself, whilst still staying cautious as to not get himself lost in his head. Somehow, he should have guessed that the west of the canyon would be the slower route, but for the first time in a long while, he had judged wrongly. He recounted to himself over what he ordered Billet to do. It should have been fine, as he handpicked only the people that she most got along with in this month. As long as they had a positive relationship, Billet was sure to encourage her team. Just then, a view of much grander proportions was seen. As a green color had flashed all around Byleth's vision, an array of monochrome shadings joined in as well. Pain, agony, tears, bloodshed, screams, trauma, were all the things he had just witnessed. The colors finally returned, and Byleth was left standing further away from where he had previously been. A group of enemies appeared, so Byleth reacted in a completely calm state. Everyone split into different groups of two and attack from a different trajectory. As they did what he told them, Byleth began thinking. This exact event had happened beforehand, so why was this repeating? A full half an hour of combat took place, and the number of bandits were thinning. It was another enemy taken down. As Petra had saved Caspar from sustaining a minor injury, she smiled at him earnestly. A thanks was made, but nothing more. This time, the flow of time did not rewind. As Byleth looked around him to check for any differences in the environment, suddenly he fully grasped what had happened. Those images of agony were the very ones witnessed by his sister. His eyes widened finally, and in a sudden, he paced himself. "I want everyone to follow me. We need to maintain our front, whilst also checking on how the other team I dispatched is doing when we can reach them." "Right." Most of them shouted in unison. "I see you have finally realized the foolish mistake it was of splitting the group up." Hubert slightly chuckled to himself. "If I see Lady Edelgard in ruin, I'll have you to blame." "We have heard that story before, Hubert," Byleth responded, but still fixated his mind elsewhere. I am aware that I have potentially scraped my reputation around you, however that is the least of my concern. I want you to simply hurry and do as you are ordered to do. Hubert scoffed, however his teacher showed ignorance to this. Right now, as of this moment, Billette and her group were in danger, and were in high chances of suffering yet again. Beelith was exactly where she had been before. She was confused at first, but forgot all about it when she had seen Dorothea's wound non-existent on her stomach. Bernadetta was in much happier spirits, Linhard had not lost his sanity, and Edelgard managed to keep both her arm and axe fixed just as they were before. The obvious answer to all of this, whilst it was far-fetched, was that somehow time reversed itself to a moment before the ambush took place. Billette wanted to cry at this moment. It happened all the time. She would think it was her time of change, but would always fall back down to where she landed herself beforehand. As she saw their faces changed from everything that took place beforehand, she now truly realized the consequences of her potential actions. Never, ever, would she let her students die, even if it cost her own life and sanity with it. That was her new resolve, and unlike the last time, she was going to stick to it. Professor, the same thing as before happened. As if it were a reenactment, Dorothea asked her lingering question. Is killing people one of the Church's teachings? The group did as they had done before, but Billette only did it a step faster out of memory. When they stopped in their tracks, Billette had to do 3 things in the short time limit to when they were ambushed. Now, her first set goal had popped up right in front of her. I guess memories flashed before her eyes. We all came here for our initial reasons. I have my own reason too, which is to protect those closest to me, and something else too. I've had it for a while, but I only just recently realized how important it was. Sometimes we have to do what our path has set for us if we want to keep those around us happy. I guess that makes sense. Bernadetta mumbled in agreement, which was followed by a hum of agreement by Edelgard. They had little time before the ambush took place now. It was the only thing on Biletta's mind, and she knew how easy it was to mess up. Without realizing it, Biletta's body grew cold in anxiety. Now was not the time for this. In the time that Billette had set for herself, she knew that her second goal now had to be reached. Ignoring the shivers from her hands, she spoke towards Linhard before he could give his snide remark. Linhard, why didn't you tell us about your phobia for blood? For the first time, the group witnessed Billette in a negative mood. That sort of behavior could lose lives, you know. She recalled what had previously transpired. Whilst the students would have no chance of remembering it, Billette still felt emotions of turmoil towards these events. What excuse do you have? I can take missing lessons, I can take giving snide remarks, I can even take sleeping in your most important lectures, but why did you never tell me about this of all things? You're such a bother, Linhard replied instantaneously, sending further shivers to his teacher. Your attitude to everything may seem approachable to most, but I simply can't stand being around the most energetic of people. Besides, I simply assumed Casper would tell you anyways. Linhard. Edelgard shouted now, wasting much more of the precious little time they had. That's not an excuse to dash. You're right. I'll work on my behavior. Just don't do this again, please. Billette knew he had given a lazy excuse, but by now she was far too stressed to be having to deal with lecturing him. Brother is always here too, so next time I want him to be informed of anything important. In the meantime, I'll work on my attitude. That's good. Thank you, Professor. As the rest of the group watched in shock at Linhard's successful attempt at talking down to their teacher, Billette was far too concerned in the battle which was to take place within the next minute. Her first goal was completed, which was to answer Dorothea's question in a concise and short time. Her second goal, which was to use the saved time from her first quest, in order to lecture Linhard, was also completed. Finally, her third goal was arguably the most important, which was to make it out of this battle with everyone alive and well. It started just as before. It was abrupt, loud, and supposed to be chaotic. Bernadetta fell onto the ground with a thud, and a large patch of smoke was made in the chaos. Billette chose not to fall down and stumble again, but to instead quickly shove Dorothea out of the way from the hurtling axe aimed towards her. A small wound was made across her cheek as it passed, but Billette ignored it. As the smoke cleared, Everyone saw the sight which signaled the start of the battle, as well as the resolve of their class. The very image of Billette grasping the caught axe that would have nearly killed Dorothea was in her hands. It had been caught, but cost Billette many scratches across her arms and face. Linhard, close your eyes or turn back around. We can properly deal with your phobia later. Billette focused firstly within her priority. How far of a range can you normally heal within? I've heard that early on, mages don't usually have the resolve to cast from large areas. Around 2 meters. He still maintained his usual cocky attitude, which was likely due to his eyes being closed from the bloodshed. All right, same strategy as before, then. Billette muttered to herself. Bernadetta, I'll keep an eye on the others, but can you shoot from afar, please? Yes. She answered in panic at the situation. All right you two, Billette now faced Edelgard and Dorothea. Rush ahead with me. As long as Bernadetta can guide Linhard whilst supporting us, we can be healed whilst on the front lines. The two nodded their heads in tandem. As Edelgard pulled out her axe, so too did Dorothea with her sword. She always had preferred the use of dark magic, but as she was commanded to use something different, Dorothea put her faith in what was ordered of her. Finally, the plan was successfully set in motion. No longer was there a disturbance caused, or trauma brought back, or even a major miscommunication. This time, the plan went off without a hitch. Bernadetta did as she was told. As her green crest symbol appeared from above her, she continued shooting at high speeds with her bow and arrow. Occasionally she stopped to push Linhard forward, whilst shouting nervously about who had sustained a cut from the enemy for Linhard to heal. Edelgard and Dorothea also did the same. As they slashed away their foes in a group of two, their teacher was far too busy recalling the various ways they blundered before. Long before, an arrow had been shot, sending screams across the canyon. The very archer who dislocated the arm of Bernadetta was the one who was a bigger priority to Billette than Costas himself. As she caught a glimpse of the archer readying his bow to disarm one of her students, Billette rushed in with all of her strength. She had to do this, and she had to make sure to not mess it up under any circumstance. As a measly shove was given, she threw her sword towards the archer, killing him in the process. When she picked it up again, Costas had finally appeared. The bandits were all disposed of, and now Linhard and Bernadetta had caught up to the group. It had happened in such a short time, but finally the entire group got to see Costas and make it through the horde. Rather than looking forward to the battle ahead of him, he saw the group, and saw the faces of determination from the class. You're all going down. He sneered. You took them all out, but not me. You. Billette finally brought herself the courage to speak again. Your plan brought so much tears. I don't ever want to go through that again. Never, ever, 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 do I want to go through what you've put me through. Billette faced her sword towards the man shrouded in dark desires. I swear on my life, I'll never let you do what you previously got away with. The hell you on about? Costas spoke in confusion, but did little in letting it offset him. Wait a second, I just realized you're the same brat who beat me to death last time. You're telling me you teach a class of self-esteemed nobles now? Ha, laughable at best, let me tell ya. The group were clearly disturbed by his attitude to everything, however when seeing Biletta's unwavering face, suddenly it all held true to them that she really did mean her reason earlier about why she fought her battles. Her resolve to never let anyone close to her die was showing, and whilst she was acting unusually dramatic, the determination she had shown began to inspire the group. Finally, in the plain and rocky arena, the group were about to start their fight. With a quick shout of courage, each member of the group took to their preferred positions and rushed onto the fray in their own way. As Billette rushed in with a flurry of seething rage, Edelgard, too, maintained a good defense and joined into an attempt at overwhelming their opponent, whilst Dorothea and Linhard were waiting and charging up their magic spells to wait for use at an opportune time. Meanwhile, Bernadetta readied herself nervously for a new command which would be issued towards her. This was truly the final moments of the battle. If everything failed at this point, Billette would truly give up on ever having a hopeful future. All her life, she was doing the right thing. Never again would Billette let her true emotions show. She had to do as she did before, and keep it all to herself, or she would cost everyone their lives. Finally, she knew this was the optimum solution. Edelgard's axe broke, but Belette passed her the sword she was carrying with a quick dash. She had much preferred her usual axe, and when Edelgard missed her potential killing shot against Costas, Belette had ran in and used the small armor plating on her elbows to defend her best pupil. Bernadetta, shoot above and keep at it, Belette had ordered. As Costas had still kept his axe slammed against Belletta's armor plating, she quickly used this opportunity to kick his left leg, offsetting his balance in the process. Costas saved himself quickly from falling over, but he realized in the seconds from looking upwards, that arrows were flying high in the air. Now, the tide of battle had finally shifted to Belletta's favor. As the two front-line soldiers continued their flurry of attacks, Costas only grew slower in his, from the distraction of the arrows potentially landing and killing him. This only fell further into his disadvantage when he realized the giant beams of blue rods being fired towards his way. Thoron. Dorothea had shouted in complete knowledge that this was their victory. Costas was finally pushed backwards, and he fell when noticing the arrows up above. This slight startle was the death of him, as soon, the final words he would ever hear were said. Edelgard, I know that we never taught you about swords fully, but I know you can do this. Do it for yourself, and everyone else, and for the good of what you believe in. Belette screamed with all her might. Do it because that's why we're here. We're here to test our resolve, and never waver in discontent. Win this battle for us. The angry face of Edelgard was seen from above him. As her silky white hair flowed along the movements of her running, he realized this was the final thing he would see in his life. The Flame Emperor was correct. This was his grave, and to him, there really was no way he could have avoided this. Stab. The wound was made. The breathing had finally stopped. It all ended. As everyone stopped their flurry of attacks, Bernadetta's last array of arrows landed with a thud. Belette and Edelgard slumped onto the ground, Dorothea heaved sighs of relief, and Linhard rushed towards everyone to heal them and assist their needs, now finally opening his eyes. She did it. Finally, after what felt like a torturous eternity, Belette had run towards her dream of protecting everyone. Everybody was far too fixated on their own lost strength to care for anyone else, so without realizing it, Belette cried. Chapter 20, Suthies, the Beginning. Sister, are you well? Byleth voiced himself immediately upon seeing his sister. Although his voice was that of calmness, the instant way of communication had notified Belette that she must have alerted him somehow. It's all okay now. I think we beat him. The rest of the group emerged now. As the whole class was finally assembled together, their attention was now on that of the defeated Costas. Seeing his face had unsettled the twins and Edelgard. To think, this was the very man that we met on that day, Edelgard recalled, holding back her voice slightly for the first time. It all sends chills down my spine, seeing how the system of the lower class can mistreat others and contort them into this. He chose this fate of his own violation, Byleth assured the rest of this class. Sooner or later, many of you will get used to this form of behavior. Many years ago, I too had to watch the transformation of someone going through exactly what you are under. Edelgard, Hubert, Bernadetta, Dorothea, Caspar, Petra, Ferdinand, and Linhard looked across the piles of deceased bandits around them. Each of them had different thoughts going on around their head, but they all still knew this was the path that they chose. Professor Belette, I have confusion over what happened on the side of yours. Petra spoke for the rest of her group. You were carrying much quickness in finishing this job. It is almost like you had known about all of this. Petra's joke had sent a chill towards Belette. Keeping her thumbs pressed towards her fists, she tried her very hardest to forget the events that had transpired beforehand. Soon enough, everyone in the class would move forward, so she too had to do the same. As her head faced her brother's, Belette attempted to mimic that very same response her brother would have hopefully done. We acted as we should have. I saw a situation, thought about our outcomes, and carried out the best solution. That doesn't sound right. Everyone turned to Caspar, who had involuntarily raised his voice. I mean. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but you don't exactly. I think what Caspar means to say, Ferdinand jumped in to help his classmate. Forgive us for saying this if it offends you, but we think you are not sounding of the right mindset. Are you feeling alright, Professor? Finally, now even the original group Billette controlled looked over at their female professor. All of their stares began to make her feel uncomfortable. One by one, this was how Billette felt that she was losing their trust. Haha, here I am acting like the hunk of wood that's my brother, she responded haphazardly. Maybe the whole posh thing doesn't work for me, huh? That is certainly the sister I know, Byleth replied finally. It is good to see you had not suffered any mental casualties from that battle. Let us all press onwards from here. At best, we can make it at the halfway mark if we walk without minor rest. Let us set up a camp from there. Sure thing, brother of mine. As Billette followed after him, she gave a look to Costas, and then one to her class. Come on, everyone. I'd say no matter what group we're in, we probably all want some sleep right about now. The class watched as both twins walked away from them slowly. So similar in appearance, yet so different in personality. That was what they knew about them, but so too was their secrets and understanding of people so varied. Oh, good, I was starting to wonder when I could be allowed for a nap. Linhard walked onwards, but was stopped instantly by Edelgard. Hold on, do you understand what's going on here? She's putting on a brave face, so why not just leave her be? I doubt she'll ever tell us what's really on her mind, so why waste the effort? The class wanted to argue back, but Linhard was making a sound judgment. Under no circumstances were they in any condition to know so much about the twins. This is our victory. Hubert freed Edelgard's hand away from his classmate's shoulder and continued walking onwards. I'm not going to let a petty feeling excruciate the success we brought ourselves. Forget about the minor things, as it never will concern us, unless they themselves decide so. Edelgard took the words of her retainer. It pained her a little to do so, but she knew that strength had never always come from pity. As she signaled onto her class to walk forward, they all quickened their pace to catch up with the leaders of their group. Dash! With fires blazing, and wild boars caught through the agile hands of Petra, the night sky was lit with the orange glow of fire. Below it, was the munching and crunching of meat from the students, talking as they normally would within a school day. They had set logs within a circle to sit on, with a large leaf pile around the middle for the comfort of their feet. The twins had made sure to have kept tents within the bags of the students, which they set up behind them. They were small, compact, and low quality, but were still enough for a night's sleep. Whilst Petra was busy expertly grilling the spare portions of meat she unexpectedly brought over, the rest of the class sat on the logs and chatted with one another happily. Not as conventional as our school cafeteria, huh? Billette said, busily ridding herself of the piece of meat before her. Makes me forget the tiring trek we took today. So much work, and it still feels like we're not done. It is because of the more hunts I have hunted. Petra said cheerfully whilst looking back at Billette. As she realized the mistake she made with her speech, she immediately changed it back. It is because of the hunts that I have made. You got that right. Casper had done the same, but this time at an even faster rate. That real lady really should give us more rewards. At least the knights get paid, but what about us? We're free labor at this point. Casper, you should try to eat with diligence and severe modesty, Ferdinand spoke, but quickly focused on Edelgard. And as for you, I see you beat me in beating the large bandit first. Do not be so easily distracted, as next time I will do the very same next month. As she was about to answer, Hubert interrupted. She doesn't have time for the likes of you, so I suggest not leeching yourself with Lady Edelgard. As a servant, you have no right to butt in. That is how society works. Ferdinand eyed Hubert with hostility. I take action when a severe hindrance comes towards my master. In this case, that is you. As the two eyed each other, Edelgard focused her attention on Dorothea sitting beside her. Ferdinand seems to take a liking towards you all the time, so is there any way you deal with him? Does avoiding him at all costs count unless absolutely necessary? Dorothea joked. That is a sound movement, but simply running away from your problems does not help much. Really, because I'd do it any day. Bernadetta now finally brought herself to answer their conversation. Running away is nice. At least then, I can be alone dash. Simply being alone doesn't do too much, Burn, Dorothea sighed. I'll fix you up eventually. Hey, that's harassment. Not if I do it secretly. Dorothea winked slightly, sending a chuckle from Edelgard, and a gasp of horror from her friend. I can see you both have already become fast friends. I suppose 1 month should have given us all enough time to bond, but I was too busy getting Linhard to do work. Edelgard groaned. Where is he now, anyway? Linhard, I think he's sleeping in one of the tents. Of course he is. The class atmosphere was refreshing to see, and as they all kept to their circles, a few of them were beginning to merge with one another. This brought the teachers a lot of pride, and as Belette finally finished munching her final piece, she looked towards everyone with a smile. All of Belette's previous feelings had been ceased for now, and considering her brother could never figure out what went on in her head, it brought her relief that she could return to normal again. All in all, an amazing mission if I do say so myself. She heightened the sound of her smug voice, whilst standing up so the class could focus on her. 1 month down, and a whole bunch more to go. We all did amazing, and the fact that we got to see Edelgard pick something up that wasn't an axe definitely makes me wonder what I could do if I tutored you all correctly. Either way, we did it, so congrats, everyone. The entire class gave a cheer, and as everyone looked at one another with smiles, Edelgard spoke up. Your instructions were very well executed, Professor Belette. I believe you played a large part in that battle. She's right, Professor, Dorothea chimed in. That timing, the skill, even the execution. I spent a lot of my life acting for the opera, so I know it can be very tricky to get those things right, but you did it effortlessly. You were just as amazing as Professor Byleth was back from the mock battle. That good, huh? Casper sounded dissatisfied, almost as if he was wishing to be pitted with the group as well. I guess they're unstoppable when put together. Belette smiled awkwardly, and sat back down in hope of trying to level with the sitting classroom. I'm not really that amazing. Just ask brother. There are a bunch of stuff I did that almost got us nearly killed in the past. That must have been years ago, however. Edelgard spoke. Over time, you must have seen from what Professor Byleth was doing, and adapted. Maybe you may not see it now, but you most likely secretly made great strides, considering you did this all in your first try dash. First try. Belette suddenly shouted. It was a loud one, and the class looked over at her. I guess, we survived, but for a first try. I don't know dash. What do you mean? Did we not just beat that challenge? No, it's not that. I can't exactly piece all of this dash. Belette wanted to speak over what had happened, but it would have all sounded far-fetched. Did she dream all of this up before that battle? Was it an imaginary scenario she had perfectly predicted? Did that never happen in the first place, and she was thinking of it now? Suddenly, Belette began feeling a slow ache reach her head. Gosh, I'm getting tired from all this thinking. Ignore all this blabbing on my end. I'm not as good as brother, but I do try, that's all I want to say. Are you going to sleep? It's pretty late now, so yeah. Early start, and I'm bad at waking up, she joked. Good night, everyone. As Belette waved towards the class, they too replied back with the same sign. From opening and closing the tent doors, Belette rested. Her brother was still outside, entertaining everyone else. Eventually, he too would inform everyone to get some sleep as well, so she had no need to worry right now. It was so abrupt. Her class must have thought that she was sick, or strange, or even going mad with stress. Either way, this was a strange day for her, and she had wanted it to be over. As Belette closed her eyes, the darkness overtook her, and she drifted towards the root of her day's bizarre events. She awoke, except it was within a dark place of existence. Belette was unsure of what was going on. She walked onwards. It was out of instinct, and her thought process was completely one-sided. Still in a daze, she finally came across it. It was the green throne that towered above her. The very one with patterns that used to haunt her from when she was a child. The one where her dreams were always corrupted, and the one where she had adored Byleth's version of. Finally, when seeing this, Belette realized that she was within a dream. Footsteps came now. Belette thought this must have been the girl of glamorous clothing she had seen for all of these years. Let me guess, it's either torn clothes, bruised or disembodied face, maybe even just a waddle of green hair coming to greet me, Belette groaned. It's new almost every time, so I may be wrong as well, but still, if it's to the point that I can tell this is another of those corrupted dreams I keep having, then you must be running out of things to do right now. As Belette squinted her eyes to see the figure making its way towards the other side of the throne, she noticed that it was a familiar black silhouette than she would normally associate it with. Once the full color began to appear, she widened her eyes. Since when was I just a pile of green hair? And why do you think I would be in those outrageous forms? Byleth appeared. Are you well, sister? Well, this hasn't ever happened before. Belette mumbled to herself. No little girl this time, but I got something way stranger. What the heck is my brother doing here? Sister, I can assure you that I am of the reality in which you are familiar with. Don't try to trick me. Belette stuck her tongue out childishly. You're probably the green-haired posh-looking girl, but in a disguise. Please listen to me. I keep having to repeat myself, but I am . Ugh, a voice was heard. It came from the direction of the throne. Shut up, already. You two act like bickering children . Says the one who looks like one. Belette shouted back in triumph, completely still unaware of who was the person she was speaking to. Foey, do not think me a mere child. Both of you are indebted to me as of today. By now, both of the twins finally looked at the girl before them. It was the very one they had dreamt of all their life. The one with patterned, silk clothing, ruffled green hair, long elf-like ears, and emerald-colored eyes. In all her life, Belette had never known who she truly looked like. The contortions from her mind always hindered her from seeing her in a normal form, so to see her now had left her with complete awe. Truly, the girl before them was one of a powerful status. Wait. Belette finally focused fully towards the entity who sat above the throne. No way, you're not. That's how you look like. This is my usual attire, yes . And those clothes are still fixed. Your body is in one piece, you can still speak our language, you've got a normal size with no weird stretches, and you still stay in one place . Belette slumped onto the ground in complete awe. All these years, and I never knew what you looked like without my dreams messing with me. I'm finally having a full dream, with the girl I could never fully talk to for years. Yes, you are. I'm a female, birthday is the 19th of the Garland moon, I'm a human, and I forgot the rest of the usual questions that you'd normally ask with brother. Please don't disappear. Belette stuttered nervously, with obvious excitement. The green-haired girl groaned at this, and finally got out of her throne in annoyance. Can you calm down, or should I be wishing for your brother to do it for you? Are you like some fairy? Also, why do you like brother so much? Can you please show him what it's like to have a corrupted dream, because that's really annoying . I asked her to meet you, Byleth interrupted, silencing his sister. As the piece finally came back into the abyss, Belette looked over at her brother in complete shock. Brother, you did, what? After your near unfortunate death in the Red Canyon, I asked for Suthies to meet you. I would have done so myself, especially after that phenomenon took place. Suthies now stepped onto the very same level that the twins were standing on, causing the twins to have to adjust their heads downwards to honor her. As you have been told before, my name is Suthies, but you may also call me, the Beginning. The Beginning. Belette peered curiously. Wait, what's going on? This is a rather arduous story to be told, and I have little bother to deal with it as of now . So basically, you're lazy? Belette asked, annoying the small being besides her. No, I am not. How is it that you are much more incapable and bothersome than your own brother? Suthies grumbled. Allow me to explain it to my sister. Byleth took little notice of the insult, and faced his sister in confidence. We are unaware of how you had never seen this, but long ago, on our very first battle with Costas, I had my life saved by Suthies. By turning the hands of time backwards, we averted a deathly crisis, and continued onwards. From then on, she had been living in my head and observing what had happened in this last month. When you reached that battle in the canyon, however, suddenly all three of us felt joint. We cannot exactly recall how you did it, but a connection was made, leading to the turning back of time. Suthies had saved your life, and I, too, had felt the shift and change. Afterwards, I asked about this meeting, and we both hoped for the best in informing you of your battle's causes. That's way too much information at once. Billet slapped her cheeks twice in annoyance. Is this why you were keeping to yourself the entire of the feast? Indeed. And why you had caught up to my group earlier than what happened on my first attempt in the battle? That is correct. This is Dash. Billet raised her hand to look at it. I don't know whether I'm happy, because I've finally met Suthies, sad, that you kept this from me, or annoyed, that we're only seeing one another now. The only thing I'm sure of, is that I'm confused. That is a completely understandable decision to choose. Suthies spoke up now. We do not yet understand why you even felt a connection with us, and I am not even sure about this entire phenomenon myself, but a lot more happened, which we have yet to cover. Noticing Billet was far too shocked to make a sly reply, Suthies continued her speech. Both of you, under pure consent from my end, have the power to turn the hands of time. Whilst I have never intended it for you, Billet, it had somehow transferred over. Your very need to fix the disaster that took place a few hours ago had changed the entire course of history, and made it so that you could rewrite your mistakes. This is still too much. And yet you shall be forced to accept it either way. Byleth spoke up. I do not understand why you are in denial over all of this. You have seen the reality of it all, so how are your doubts still here? There's more to it than that. This is unnatural. I understand why you are in such panic. However, now you should see this as an advantage. Mark today as a victory. In an attempt to quiet her shock, Suthies jumped upwards at an extraordinary height to poke her thumb on Biletta's forehead. I will give you some time to calm yourself, before I begin informing you of how your new ability works. Finally, Billet had time to think. As she thought back to everything that had taken place beforehand, her mind realized that what Byleth had said was the truth. She had to accept this, and to do so was asking a lot of her, but she would do it either way. I think I'm all right now. Please explain everything. Very well. I shall tell you about what I have dubbed the 3 rules of the Divine Pulse, and how you should utilize it exactly. Suthies stepped back in order to list what she was about to tell. There are 3 main principles to the Divine Pulse, and as discussed before, the Divine Pulse itself allows you to turn back the hands of time in order to rewrite your wrongs. Firstly, the one who chooses to turn back the hands of time will always end up seeing their events being looped. These memories are then transferred over to the other sibling, and then both of you are alerted of what you have done wrong. This can be used when one of you requires immediate aid, or simply wants to tell the other of your location. Second, no matter who uses it, or what causes you to use it from here on out, the energy required to pull it off is not taken from you, but from me. Using it too many times may cause me to lose more energy, and this equates to you both having a limited number of uses. You are not invincible, and you certainly cannot become complacent. Finally, before Suthies spoke once more, her voice deepened in seriousness. This is of the utmost importance, and should always be taken care of. You both need to be aware of this, and I will not tolerate you breaking this rule. Do not, under any circumstance, do this to yourselves. Under no event, shall you continue abusing the Divine Pulse, even after it has drained my power. What happens next, is that physical wounds within yourself will begin to manifest, and you shall feel the very pain that you humans regard excruciating, and the one I have felt when using the Divine Pulse. No matter what the outcome, if you begin feeling a toll, whether mentally or physically when using it, then I strongly urge you to abort your causes and accept what becomes next of you. The rules were given, and the consequences for not following them sounded severe. False, was what they all sounded like. No matter how far-fetched it had sounded, both of the twins realized that this was in fact the truth. After all, with what had been going on right now, all 3 of the trio had their fair share of confused questions. So, in short, we see what the other one of us does. We have a limited use of these divine pulses, and we end up damaging ourselves by pushing ourselves to use it too much. Precisely. Suthies reinforced her principles, to help both the twins understand. There are a lot of restrictions. For a power we should not be possessing to begin with, I have no qualms obeying them, Byleth responded, leading to the two waiting for their last confirmation. It's all so fast. I don't get it all, but yeah. I'll definitely try and follow those. Suthies sighed, but moved onwards onto the conversation. Simply trying is not good enough, but I suppose I shall deal with it now. You both really are troublesome, but that is a cost I can pay to find my answers. Looking over at Byleth, she began to recount what she had previously told Byleth. As you are not yet aware, I shall tell you something of great importance. All I know about myself is that I am not human, and I am Suthies of the beginning. My origins are a large enigma, and even my weak latent connection towards you stands its own theories to make. It is clear that me and Byleth resonate with one another almost perfectly, and when using the divine pulse on you, I had to try to exert more of my energy than usual. For some reason, you have a weaker connection than I do. Byleth looked confused at this statement, and wanted an answer to this question desperately, but knew it was impossible to find at this moment. As she looked over at her brother, she too wondered what had made him resonate more with Suthies than her. The chain of thought was broken once Suthies yawned to herself. I'm tired. She swiped the ongoing tear from her eye. Whilst you two are at sleep, my endurance whilst woken here seems to mimic that of a child. I suppose I should ask you to leave this place. I'm not one to ruin someone's sleep, so I guess we'll leave you be. We shall excuse you. Do not be worried by our presence. As Suthies smiled at these responses, she slowly trudged upwards to her throne. After yawning and groaning, she waved a childish goodbye, and put herself to sleep. She acts so smart, but that cuteness overshadows her, Byleth commented in awe, to which her brother ignored her. All of a sudden, the dream ended. The pitch-black background had overtaken the throne, and for the first time in the twins' life, they finally slept properly that night. Check the description for the links to the author.